that they utilized and the results of that tool and implementation. So feel free to ask questions as each presenter is finishing up, you know, something that comes to mind, but we will have time at the end for not only additional questions, but for you all to share some of your ideas and best tips. Sound good? Is that okay with everybody? All right, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Michelle, I see Michelle's with us. Again, she's going to be speaking on test banks and promoting academic honesty. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. How is everyone? I hope the new year is starting off well for all of us, although it appears to be just as crazy, at least as end of 2020 was. So we'll all keep our seatbelts on for a little while. Am I able to share PowerPoint, Kristen?
You should be able to. Go ahead and give it a try.
Okay. And if this is too much, you'll all let me know. So
we can see it, Michelle.
Okay, great. So I have heard from a lot of my colleagues that testing in Canvas, especially in this COVID time, has presented a lot of challenges. Some folks have chosen to use Lockdown Browser or other kinds of things. I have actively chosen not to do that and rather to use test banks and to create very large test banks with the help in some cases of publishers, and a lot of them I'm generating as well. To try and address that issue around cheating. Students, I have had a lot of feedback from students. They don't like Lockdown Browser or any of the other kinds of activities that are taken to restrict their movement and so forth while they're taking a test. For many of them, it really increases anxiety. And for me, since many of my students are here at Firelands and I have ages, you know, honestly 14 to 64 in my classes, I'm trying to reduce as much of the anxiety as possible. So I use a lot of test banks. So if you have a nice large test bank, it significantly reduces cheating because students simply realize there's no point, right? They can't know in advance what they're going to get. And as a result, they just after a while don't even attempt it, has been my experience. So when I say a large test bank, for any given test or section of a test, I try to use 25% or less of the questions that I have in my test bank. Rules of thumb will vary if you look in the literature to 10% or so. It just depends on, the topic and how far along you are with developing your test questions. I like to give tests in an online environment because it provides quick feedback, and that's really important to students as well as they get their grade right away. So that's really important to students. And an important thing in an online environment and in this time of COVID is staying sane. So my experience is I want to do less dishonesty paperwork in this kind of environment because it just adds to the stress for everyone, and I would rather write a question than deal with student issues, complaints, etc. So for those of you who haven't used test banks, you can use all different kinds of questions. You can make up your own questions, you can use test banks, and the format for questions, as you can see here, that are available in Canvas, run the gamut from true, false through to just open text, essay questions, file uploads, all kinds of things. If you're teaching a mathematical class or any class where an answer needs to be arithmetic, you can use the math features within Canvas to set an answer in a range or precision. You can have an error margin, other things to help address rounding issues or other things that might come up. To create a test bank, you want to click on the quizzes tab. Then you'll notice blank dots in the upper right, and that looks something like that if you are in Canvas. When you click on those dots, you'll get something that says Manage Test Banks. I have used and still sometimes use question groups, but I have found that it's clunkier than actually creating test banks.
Hey, Michelle, this is Rock. I'm monitoring the chat room for Christian.
Oh, thank you.
Kristen, we already have a question.
Oh, great.
Within a test, do all students get the same question or do you randomly select questions?
Thank you for asking that. No, I said it. So if I have a test bank of 100 questions, I'll tell the system to choose 25 at random and no more than 25% of the questions, right? So I try to make sure I have 4 times as many questions, and there is no firm rule, and it can vary class to class, but I try to have at least 4 times as many questions just to reduce duplication. And they come in all different orders, and I also include the randomize the answer presentation. I use time limits, and I show 1 question at a time, all of those things to try and reduce cheating. Okay, so when you have are in your managed test banks area, you want to add a question bank, you type in a name and press enter. This took me forever to figure out. Just press enter. It's not, there's no add it, save it, any of that, just press enter. Once you're there, you'll see something that looks like this at the bottom, and you just add a question. And you'll see regular question options come up just as it is in regular Canvas. So in my experience, publisher provided test banks are useful if you have a section of the test you're happy to make a did you read the text kind of question. I don't find them very useful for critical thinking or integrative kinds of questions, so I tend to focus my efforts on creating those kinds of questions to add into the test bank. It's real easy to import publisher questions. There's plenty of tutorials within Canvas for how to do that. It's just an import existing content type the publisher needs to tell you. And then if there's other fancy things you want to do, you'll need to have a look at Canvas support. So in my experience, the result has been that my students are happier and less whiny and accept their score more easily than I have found when using other means to try and address cheating. I don't want to create more anxiety for the students than they would have normally taking a test, and I have had many fewer panicked emails or texts or whatever from students if they aren't in a lockdown browser kind of environment, which means my stress level goes way down while they're taking their tests. Another weird side effect is that I feel much better about allowing students to make up a test if they have a legitimate reason for having missed it, or I'll even give a second try. I was very skeptical about the role of second tries, but I have used it more, and particularly oddly in my upper level classes, because I'm very concerned about the students learning the materials. And as they get closer and closer to graduation, I guess my concern for that gets stronger and stronger. So I will create a situation where students know they can have 2 tries. And the research really is kind of on the side as far as learning is concerned. If you're interested in, if grade inflation or whatever is a concern, but for me in my upper level courses here at Firelands, that is less of a concern because I have 12 students, and if they've made it all the way through the program at that end, they should be, capable. So by giving 2 tries, they actually are learning more. They're gauging what, that is expected. They're meeting my requirements better. And students love it. They feel like you're on their side, and they like the idea that they're getting an extra turn, and they seem to not be particularly concerned about the idea that you're kind of tricking them into spending an hour, 2 hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours more in the material. It really has worked well for me. So I have found it to be a great way around some of the banes of an online environment and testing in an online environment in particular. Any other questions from the chat?
Michelle, this is Ruth. Could you go into a little more detail about why you think the question groups are clunkier than the test bank? If I was trying to do this for the first time, why do I care?
Sure. So the question groups, You don't have as much flexibility. So first, to add a test bank, you must create a group within the online test, right? So to add the test bank into your test, you create a group and then choose a test bank within that, which I'm realizing I didn't show here. What the test bank allows you to do is to break questions up. It also allows you to copy questions, and the groups don't allow you to copy questions as conveniently as the test bank does. You can also break test banks apart to use pieces of things or a smaller set of the questions as a practice test, which if I'm not doing 2 tries at a test, sometimes I'll do a practice test. So I just found it to have more flexibility. Plus they stay in the background as their own entity. They don't follow a course as a group. So you can add those questions. You can create a test bank and then pick and choose questions from it, maybe that cross courses even, which is sometimes appropriate, especially if you're teaching something like a capstone class that has any testing component to it. Other questions? I'm sure I've talked through my time.
Questions or others who have experience using test banks?
I would love to hear others' experience.
I can talk a little bit. I used test banks and groups for the first time this past semester. And I found groups to be really useful if you wanted, because Michelle, I heard you mention this about how sometimes if you have a whole bunch of different question types, it can confuse students. So that's how I sectioned my exam off, was like I had file upload questions in one group and they were being pulled from a test bank. So they were randomized somewhat. And then I had all the multiple choice were in a second group. So students saw all the different types together. That's what I found useful.
And I think that's worth noting that I also will separate file upload questions like any essay or skill-based practice this, upload your result, from the multiple choice section and have it timed separately and everything.
That's interesting. You just commented about timed separately. How does that work?
Sure. So I actually make 2 separate tests, and then in the instructions, I remind students this is part 1, and you must go to this other test and take it as well. And they're both due at the same time, has been my experience. So students who like essay portions, they may choose to take the essay, which is essay or skill-based practice, right? The file upload components. Right. They may choose to take that separately from the multiple choice. It also allows you to tailor time better, right? So no one's getting a full 2 hours or whatever for the test. I keep the multiple choice to, you get 45 minutes or an hour, depending on the number of questions. And then I'll give maybe 45 minutes to an hour for the essay as well. And typically I separate kind of the focus of multiple choice from the essay questions.
Thank you, Michelle. There'll be more opportunity to ask Michelle and others questions at the end, but we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, though. It sounds like a really useful tool, not only to promote academic honesty, but also helping students learn. Next up, we have Steve Cady. Morning, Steve, who's going to share with us some of his best remote practices.
Thanks. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So if you could take a piece of paper and I want you to draw a circle in a center, have a box with an arrow to the circle, and then an arrow out of the circle to the right to another box. In the circle, put live. In the box before, put the word before. In the box after, put the word after. So when we come together in a live session, that's a remote session as we talk about them. And in order to make a remote session work well, we need to be thinking about what do we do before and after, in addition to what we do during the session. Because a lot of times what we do during a session is based on the antithesis of this principle I'm going to share with you. The one way of saying it, I'm going to say it a couple different ways. You might want to write this down because it sometimes is a little confusing to listen to this quote, but only do together what you could not otherwise do. Okay? What do I mean by that? Only do together what you could only do together live. Another way of saying it is don't do things together with students that they could be doing when they are alone or apart. Okay? So the different ways of saying it. Bottom line is, we go to meetings, and the biggest complaint about meetings are that they are just a litany of reports and people speaking, and I could have read it all, and why are you wasting my time coming to a meeting? Now, I think out of the pandemic, what's going to happen is people are going to say, I'm sick and tired of going to meetings, so I want to only do things in a meeting that involves discussing, understanding, digging deeper, making decisions, applying stuff, collaborating, getting to consensus. Those kinds of things, that's what we should be doing together. If I can read it and then come to a meeting, that's great. If we stop doing that, then all of a sudden we have to read at meetings, and we read a little bit more, present a little bit more. Then before you know it, you have a meeting that is 90% reading and 10% decision making. And that we do it because we're giving in to everybody that doesn't come to meetings prepared to dig in and dive into the tough subjects. So we give into it, and we create a whole world where meetings stink. But that's not the real case. It's the meetings stink because the people running them don't create an environment where people are doing the real work when they're together that they cannot otherwise do. So same thing with the classroom. It happens. We create a class. People show up. They didn't read. We put them in breakout rooms. What happens? They get in their breakout rooms or breakout groups, and they look at each other and go, I didn't read. You didn't read. I didn't read. Oh, I didn't read. So they come back and they say, that activity sucked. That stunk. That was a bad activity. The classroom stinks and the professor's horrible. Well, the professor then says, darn it. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll lecture and then we'll do a group activity. Well, they can't really process it because they didn't really, so they kind of get a little bit of it. Then they do a group activity and it's kind of okay. And then it grows and grows until you have a full class. It's all it is a lecture, things that they could have done before they came. So what do we do before to cause students to show up ready to dig in and do the real work that needs to be done? That's the core of learning. And that's the art of teachers. That's the art of great teachers. And I believe that remote learning shines a light on bad teaching, personally. And yes, it can shine a light on good teaching, but it shines a light on bad teaching. And so here's the thing. When you show up live, just a few best practices, just a couple, and there's a lot. I'm working on some more stuff to create another kind of list of remote live best practices. But essentially, one thing that's key to really doing well when they show up is the breakout groups. You got to have people in live sessions you got to use breakout groups, and they've got to work on problems that matter. Okay, they've got to work on problems that they're going to be held accountable to. So that's the second best practice is think about this. People are kind of going, yeah, logically this makes sense, but very few people are doing it. Have an assignment for a grade that they have to turn in by the end of the remote session. Have that assignment directly relate to a bigger assignment afterwards. Something that they have to do in the class that then prepares them to do a individual project or something that they have to do where what I did here, oh man, it saved me a ton of time. That's the flipped classroom concept, and it sets me up for what's after. So what do you do beforehand? How do you get them to show up having read and dug in? I did this. They get the test before they show up. They get the book and the test. And you know what? I used to have the same test, the book, lecture, and the test. Scores were almost virtually, and I think in some cases better, but virtually the same as when I lectured. Meaning they read the book, took the test, scored as well as read the book, not read the book, which is what typically happens, show up and hear a lecture, maybe read the book, take the test. Scores are the same. So your lectures on content in a book that you're testing them on don't matter. That's provocative, I know, but that's what I want us to think about is when they show up in class, they've got to be working on stuff that they couldn't get otherwise. And so give them the book, give them a test, use Michelle's concepts. They take a test, they come to class having already taken the test. Now they're in class working on an assignment that they have to turn in by the end of the remote session. Or maybe it's 2 remote sessions and then part 1, part 2. And if you miss one, you sure are out of luck. But you get in, take it, get the class, get it submitted, and then you can do your other assignment at a deeper level. So those are some of the kinds of things that I would say that you do. And afterwards, one of the last things is when students take the work from in class, do best practice reports. That is a video that showcases the best students in the class, their work, showcase it, 3 people that did great work, show them the problem done well, show their work, discuss it, give them a high five, send the video out afterwards. They turn in an individual assignment, pick the best 3, show it. That's double loop learning. Now, because they're engaged. Beforehand, they read, they tested. They come in and they work on assignment, they turn it in, they use that learning to do a bigger project outside that scaffolds. So scaffolding, look up psychological learning and scaffolding. They scaffold the learning from the book to the in-class experience, scaffold. The next level on the scaffold is turn in that assignment. Problem-based, situation-based learning. That's what you're doing. Flipped classroom and those kinds of concepts. So I will step off my soapbox and sit down.
Questions or comments for Steve? Steve, I'm wondering what kind of impact that you've seen in your classrooms using this approach.
Applause. So what happens is I'll tell the students, turn it, everybody hit submit, boom. Guess what? You just got your homework done in class today, live. All of a sudden they start applauding. It's like, oh, wow, I got it done. It's amazing. You know, that kind of thing. The other thing, students say, I'm going to talk to Dean Braun. What you're doing is not fair. This is not good learning. It's not what I experience in my other classes. You're making me work too hard, think too hard. I'm going to talk to Dean Braun about this, honest to God. And I say, yes, go talk to him. You know, yes, go talk to him. And because I have to explain to them, and I oftentimes, the book, our book, Make It Stick, I assign the book for some of my classes and I have them read it. Because I share with them that at the heart of good leadership, good management, good collaboration, good organizations is problem-based work that we do together, which creates a smarter organization, a smarter class, and a smarter person. So I just make the case. I try to give the science before the class. I try to set clear expectations up front, but I also have students that, you know, love it. Usually the ones that really get the reason and they're committed to doing what they want, you know, committed to a dream, versus those that want to check a box. The ones that want to check a box don't like this kind of learning. Faculty that want to check a box don't like this kind of teaching.
I'll just give you kudos, Steve. I love it. And also by doing it in the classroom, it forces students who care to show up because otherwise they miss out on the points. So I love that as well.
Yeah, and what I would offer to you, Ruth, is points are important, but what's important before the points is the activity has got to be scaffolded to a bigger assignment or to a later learning or relevant learning. So it's got to be relevant learning with points. Relevant learning without points, but relevant, then they appreciate it. But that design is really key.
Thank you, Steve. We'll have, again, more time later for questions, but now we have Donna Greenwald, who's going to speak with us on Canvas collaborations.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk a few minutes about the problem I faced. Is that when I was teaching in person for my classes, I would implement a problem-based type of course where students would come in after they have read the text, they would be faced with a case study or a business scenario. And I would say, okay, get into groups and write the message or answer the questions, or how would you fix this problem? And I would walk around the room and I would look over their shoulder, give them feedback, pro and con, and found that once we went to a remote or once we went to hybrid, you can't walk around and be close enough that you are looking over the shoulder of the people. So therefore, I needed to find another way of managing that. And so I have been using collaboration on Canvas for both those who attend in class as well as creating the breakout sessions. So those people who are in the class on a certain day, they are socially distanced still, and they are able to use this collaboration. Those who are in remote, I create these breakout sessions, and I would keep it to no more than 4 people in a breakout session. 3 to 4 is a pretty good sized group. After they write the message, or, you know, if this could be applied to a statistical problem, or it could be a maybe 3 or 4 questions based on a case study. You would come back after the breakout session, you could have a whole class discussion, but I also found what was very useful is to have the students peer review, go through the answers, go through the messages, and they would get to pick the one that they like the best. So we wouldn't always have time in the same class to do this. So the next class, their homework would be read through all of the submissions posted on collaboration, and I will be calling on students randomly the next class and ask which team's assignment did you like the best and why, which it was very good. I had a lot of engagement. I rarely had a student that did not read the list of team messages beforehand. So when you create a collaboration, I used it extensively. So this is what it's going to look like. This is a screenshot. I might do 15 collaborations per semester because everything they're like practicing. What Steve talked about is that you do something in the classroom that's going to build up to something else in the future, which these in-class collaborations served as practice for them to individually write the message, or it could be solve the problem or respond to the case. And you could actually post on collaboration the questions and then ask the teams to get together and answer them. And they can be in different colors. You can figure out how you want to present them. So I guess some tips, and I'm going to show you how I create the collaborations if you've never used it. I use the Office 365 and I don't use Google because it gets into whether or not someone has a Google account. So it's very easy. All they have to do is log into Canvas. And the one thing, once you create the collaboration, remember to click on Edit Document, because then you can actually see the people who are typing. You are able to make changes, make suggestions. I also suggest using team names or team numbers. Keep the postings anonymous, especially if you're going to do peer review. I find that if they put their names at the bottom, then people are a little more hesitant about responding or giving constructive feedback. Another thing that I like about collaborations is that you can check in with each of the teams during the breakouts. I would not let them just, spend 20 minutes and you never touch base with them. I actually pop in to the breakout session periodically. I can judge who's working, who's not working. and I can offer advice, because when you're on collaboration and you have it up on the screen in the classroom, you can actually identify who's doing the typing and say they're really off base. They're not solving the problem, or they misunderstood the problem, so that I can go directly to that breakout session, pop in on them and talk to them privately about maybe how they got off course. And these collaborations are accessible 24/7. So if you want to assign homework to go back and review what other teams did, you can do that, and they can look and do it at their own speed. So let me show you how a collaboration works. So I'm going to go to one of my upcoming classes, and you click on collaboration. Here's where you have to change it from Google Docs to Office 365.
Donna, you have to
Got to
unshare.
stop unsharing.
Unshare, reshare, or do advanced and then share a portion of your
Okay.
screen.
Donna, you also have a question in the chat room. Do you have them in the Zoom breakout rooms to talk while they have the document open?
Yes. Yes, I do. Because what happens too is that I tell the teams, you can actually share your document with the others in your breakout session. So oftentimes I ask them to share, and then I can see, what they're writing, and I can give them feedback. Gee, that's a really good idea. Or, have you ever thought about what's the consequence of doing it this way? All right, so, you can name whatever your collaboration is. In this case, I'll just do test example. You can put in a description if you want, but I don't usually. So all you have to do is, I don't create groups. I just add everybody. So I can go through very quickly, and I add everyone into the collaboration so they all have access to it. And then you go down to the bottom, you hit save, and it will pop up. And go to the top. Here's the test example. So you click on it, and you can create these ahead of time. Oh, interesting. Well, it says you're not allowed to view this content. So I don't know what happened. Typically it goes into an online Word document, and you can actually create this ahead of time where you type in questions. Maybe you post the case study. So I'm not quite sure what happened.
Maybe you have to view it as a student or something.
No.
That won't work either.
No, you shouldn't. There it goes. So it's technology. So make sure that you go in to edit document. That way you can actually type. So, question 1, how is this different from the last case, and you can actually create that. And then the teams can come in, they can copy and paste the questions, and then they can type in the answers. So I like this, especially for writing messages, because I have, and you could do this with answering questions or solving a case study. I ask students to pick the best one and why. And oftentimes there's a winner, because so many people say, well, I picked this one. And when there seems to be an overwhelming consensus, then you are able to reward those people by saying, it looks like team 5 had the best message. People liked it the best, and here's why. And sometimes too, you can, as a faculty member, go back over the ones that there were issues and be constructive about it. And again, they're anonymous. They don't take it personally, but maybe there was something that was, way out of whack or wasn't on the right track, and explain, here's why. So sometimes it is time consuming, but I may have 10 or 11 teams to go through their messages. And I may do that in part of a class, is go through each message and give my feedback.
Donna, you have another question in the
Okay.
chat. If you add everyone to the collaborations, are they all working in one document? How does each team get their own document?
Okay, so they are working on collaboration so everyone can see everyone else's.
So it's
And
one
sometimes, yeah, someone steals, one team steals another idea that they see is pretty good, but that's learning. They learn from each other. So they're all using the same document. And that's how they can even see what the person within their breakout session is typing.
So I guess, Donna, that's what's confusing to me. So I'm imagining trying to recreate that group structure of class where I have, groups of 4 students, they're discussing some reading and, their questions I want everyone to answer. And then we're going to have each group sort of share out, right? That's sort of a common structure I use in in-person classes. But if we do collaborations, the whole class is responding to, what did you think was interesting about the text, right? Which then I'm confused about how then later when you're going through to look at responses, how you'd see different team responses if everyone's in that same document.
Because they have to identify as team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. And I don't predetermine what the teams are. It's whoever's on there first becomes team 1. Or if you know that you're going to divide the room up, you can already, with collaboration, put in team 1, team 2, team 3, and go all the way down to team 11. And then the teams, the breakout sessions, have to choose one of those places. And then I'm doing hybrid. So I've got some of the teams are in the classroom, some of the teams are remote, but still they choose a space in that document to put their answers.
So in the way you're envisioning this, the Zoom breakout room or the kids in the students in their pod in class talk, come up with an answer, and then post their sort of group answer to the collaboration.
Right. And they can do that as they are brainstorming. They can actually say their team 2. So as they type out what they want to respond or how they want to respond, that everyone can see that. Even their breakout session team can see that. But the document is so long, every group is not going to be able to see every team unless they cursor down and things like that.
Donnie, there's another question in the chat room. It looks like collaboration has a group tab. Have you used this?
No, I have not used the group tab. This is how I started using it. So I'm not familiar with how the group tab works. I'm sure that if you read through the instructions, maybe that would help some faculty use collaboration differently. But what I like about it is that it's all on one document. It's divided up by teams. So therefore, you can have students learn from each other by reading what other teams had responded, or how they responded, or how they answered the question. Yes, Amanda.
Follow-up question, Donna. Sorry.
That's
It's great. I'm learning a lot. I just have a lot of questions.
No, that's fine.
So you're creating the structure of the teams, though, by segmenting them in the Zoom breakout rooms.
Correct.
So the team structure has nothing to do with collaborations.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. So I just break people up 3 to 4 per breakout session, do the same thing in the classroom. And then, it's like, find a spot on this document and claim it as your own. So basically that's how it works. It's all on one document. Everyone can read what each other wrote. Again, make sure that you don't just let these breakout sessions you leave them alone for 20 minutes. I think it's always a good idea to pop into each of the breakout sessions right away and say, do you have any questions? Or do you know, what you're doing? Is there something that different instructions I need to give you? But to be honest, there are very few of the teams that don't know what they're doing. I think, the point is to make sure it's very clear what's the product that they are supposed to produce at the end.
Donna, I can talk a little bit about using groups with
Okay.
collaboration.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because then you have to make, either you as the instructor have to make an individual document for every group, or you have to train your students to make their documents. So if you've used groups before, you know that each group has their group homepage. It also has the collaborations tab on there. And so you can train your students to make their own documents, but in my experience, that's been a little difficult to get students to understand, oh, I have to go to my group homepage and then make a document. And it's also difficult from the instructor standpoint, where you have to create, I have a class that's pretty big, so I'd have to create, 50 documents. It could be a little challenging, but if you can train your students, then I think that could be really useful. But that's been my experience with the groups and collaborations.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, and maybe it's not for Donna, but maybe for the entire group here. So I have sat in as a participant in Zoom meetings, and they would have breakout sessions, and each group would have a PowerPoint slide, maybe with the question that was posed to their group, and their task as a group was to kind of fill in 3 or 4 bullet points on that slide and then do a report out at the end of the time. My question is, because that's a much simpler means than what you've just described here, but I don't know how that's done. Does anybody do it this way? Do you create a PowerPoint file that's shared among the breakout groups? I'm just wondering, I'd like to try to pursue that option and wonder if anybody has experience doing it that way.
With collaborations, you can create a PowerPoint. So you could do pretty much the exact same thing that Donna has described, except in collaborations, you can just change it to, instead of a Word document, creating a PowerPoint. And then you can have each of your groups have their own slide. So it'll be presented in the same way.
That probably works, but I've seen it done without collaboration. That's what I'm trying to, I guess, cut that part out.
Dwayne, I tried it at the end of the semester. I've limited experience, so I'll bow if someone has more experience with this, but I created the PowerPoint in Google Docs. And then I copied and pasted the link into the Zoom chat box. And then students would just click on that. It would take them to Google Docs, and I had a slide, as you explained, for each group where they would do their work.
Thank you.
Donna, I appreciate the step-by-step. I had been wanting to learn about collaborations, and so thank you. I don't feel as intimidated now about going in there and playing with it a little myself. Next, we have Jennifer Stewart. Hi, Jennifer, who's going to share with us her experience on virtual escape rooms.
Yeah, I am just going to share a link there. We'll talk about that in a second. Let me pull up my presentation. Okay, so, all right. So I think I've met most of you before, but my name is Jennifer. I teach in the Applied Statistics and Operations Research Department. And so primarily I teach in the business calc sequence. So in the fall, I was teaching the second course in the business calc sequence, which was BA 1700. And I was teaching that course online. So this was the second time that I taught online, not including spring semester. So I taught summer semester online, but as we all know, summer and J-term sessions are operating a little bit differently, I think, than a typical semester. So I was kind of, I liked the structure of my course, but I really wanted to know how students felt. And so I conducted a mid-semester evaluation. And in this evaluation, I got some information from students that, you know, they wanted kind of a change of pace. They wanted something that was a little bit fun, something that allowed them to talk to each other, because a lot of the students had me the previous semester in the spring semester. And so for the first half, they saw what my live class was like, where we're talking to each other a lot and we're collaborating and we're, you know, problem solving together in groups. And now we're kind of missing that aspect in online. At least I felt the same way. So I started to do some research and trying to figure out, what is a way that I can incorporate this like fun collaborative aspect. And so I found some examples of a lot of like high school teachers that were using this escape room idea in their physical classroom. So just to give you some ideas, what is an escape room? This is just like a definition from Wikipedia, but essentially, some of you may have actually went to a place and, done an escape room. But you have a team of players, they work together to solve problems or riddles or use some clues to reach a certain goal. Typically, if you're in a physical place and you're, playing this escape room game, the idea is to get out of the room. So find, the key to unlock the room. Now, whenever you're talking about things in classrooms, what people have been doing in physical classrooms is just having pretty much like lock boxes with combination locks. And, you have some task that gives the students the combination to that lock and then so on. So how does this work in a virtual setting? So some people have used Google Forms. And so I'm a big proponent for keeping everything in Canvas when you can. I think it helps students kind of, have a one-stop shop. But Canvas quizzes and the realm of what Canvas offers doesn't give you this flexibility that Google Forms gives you when it comes to giving students hints for their incorrect answers and preventing students from moving forward. So the whole idea with this was, and I'll show you the example in a second, I would give students like a little riddle that also had some written instructions with it. And they would, solve some math problems. And then through that, they would get the key to the lock and they'd get to move on. The nice thing, Donna mentioned how, you don't want to require students to have a Google account. And so the nice thing about Google Forms is that isn't required. They don't need to have a Google account to use it. So let me just open up. If you open up your link, it's going to show you from the student perspective. I'm going to show you from the, from my perspective as I'm building the form. So let me share that. So one of the nice things about Google Forms and why it works well if you want these students to have this kind of like experience where they have to, break the code to get further is that you can break your form into sections. So just like with Canvas quizzes or the test in Canvas, if you've used that before, how you can show one question at a time, this is a similar idea, except you can show a multitude of different slides or sections, different questions or text or something. So I have it broken up into some sections. Now, if you're looking at your link that I sent you, you can only see the first section right now. So you can require students to fill stuff out. So that's why there's like little stars here. That just means that it's a required question. And so you can just toggle it here to make it required. Anyway, so this first part's not that interesting, just asking for their team number and name and the date and the time. Now I had asked them for the time because I gave them a little bit of an incentive to try hard and work fast. The whole idea with escape rooms is typically you're timed and you need to get out of the room in a certain amount of time. And so I was offering extra credit to some of the groups that, were the fastest, but that's why I asked for time. But when it comes to the locks, so here's a new section. I gave them some written instructions up here, and then their riddle is down here. It's kind of silly. And then their questions are listed. But what's really interesting is that when it comes to the lock, here it was just 3 letters that were all capitals with no spaces. And this is what's really nice about Google Forms. So what you can do is you set your correct answer. In this case, our correct answer was ATS. And then you can set up this thing that allows you to give them a hint if they're wrong. So if you would type in something other than ATS, what's going to happen is it's going to pop up with my little hint. It's just saying like, try again. Here's an example. If the value you found for K, because that's what we're doing here. I'm trying not to get too far into like what the questions are actually asking, but I was having them solve for a value K, and then that gave you some information about how to pick your letters. That's the gist. But if they don't type that in, it gives them that hint, and then it stops them. They can't go any further until they fix that issue. And that's the one thing that I think sets us apart from doing it in Canvas. That's why I went with Google Forms. So I know that's a really, really quick overview, but I know we're running a little short on time, so I don't want to take up too much time. But let me go back to my presentation. And so what were the positives that I found? My students really appreciated that I was taking their feedback into consideration, giving them something fun to do. It was a big change of pace. They liked that they had the opportunity to work together, but I didn't require it. So I knew with an online class, I'm really hesitant about requiring students to work in groups, especially since I wasn't requiring it from the beginning. Because this happened kind of, like I said, after my mid-semester evaluation. So I was really hesitant about that. So I gave them the opportunity to work in groups, but they weren't required to. And then some things that I learned from it and some considerations, some things you have to be mindful of. Since I was preventing students from moving forward until they've, cracked the code on each part, you have to be very mindful of the clarity of instructions, because if you're preventing students from getting any further, you want to make sure that your instructions are very clear. Something that I have to fix on mine would be design and accessibility. So if you're doing anything that's math related, you can't type math directly into a Google form. You have to get a browser extension and then use that to type in your math. And so I need to go back through and type it all in so it's screen reader accessible. You want to also think about, are you going to pre-select groups in Canvas? Are you going to let students select their own groups? I made the mistake of assuming students knew how to select groups. I gave them, the Canvas instruction for students, that little 2-minute video that shows them how to, join a group, but it did not go well. So I think really making sure students understand how to get into groups, and maybe giving them, I don't know what else to give them other than that, but just making sure they can get into groups. And then also think about how are students going to submit and how will it be graded. So with Google Forms, you can get a Excel document that has all the group names and their score, because it automatically grades it. Or you can have students, maybe submit something to Canvas. That's what I did. I had them submit their ending screenshot to Canvas so that it was just easier. Everything was in Canvas for me to grade. But yeah, so I know this was really a quick overview of what virtual escape rooms look like, but I think that they can be really useful if you want a change of pace in an online setting. And then also, I wouldn't use this every week, but I think it's just something fun to do every so often.
Jennifer, there is a question for you in the chat box. Have you ever thought or tried using modules, prerequisites or requirements?
I use modules all the time, but it doesn't really fit in with how my course is set up to do one assignment like that. I think that could work, potentially if your course is set up in a certain way. But my course has a weekly module. So I think it'd be very confusing and maybe jarring to students to see a whole assignment as a module. I think it could absolutely work, but just not really something that and then the other side of that is too, you can't, if students don't finish something, I think it'd be hard or get the wrong answer. I still don't know how you would give them the hint.
Well, I think that's a really creative tool that you used. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Sorry,
Oh,
can I
sorry.
ask a quick question?
Sure.
So you sent us to what the student view would be like, but how do we get, where do we go to set up the virtual escape scenario?
Yeah, so you would have to have a Google account. So as the instructor, you'd have to have a Google account, and you'd go to Google Forms. And once you're on your Google account, you have, and you go to Google Forms from there, then you could just click create a new form, and it's all from there. Now, obviously there's a lot of nuances and kind of small things like sectioning it, putting the preventatives for letting them move forward, the hints and stuff. So there's a lot to it. And I mean, if you ever need help or if you want to try that, you can always let me know. I'm happy to walk you through it a little bit more, but I tried to be a little bit brief. But yeah, you just need a Google account and go to Google Forms.
Ruth, actually, that takes us to you. Ruth is our last presenter for today, and is going to talk to us about Kahoot.
Okay, so what was my problem? First of all, so my classes have always been live, BA 1500, the freshman experience course. And I've usually had it set up like a flipped classroom where we go out and we work in a publisher software. They do readings and quizzes and homework, right? Prior to me discussing any of the concepts or the case study in class. And so I have them all do that first, and they have done a review quiz before they come to class. So I already have data on the items that they missed, right? Like the most missed questions and things like that from working on their own in this flipped classroom approach. This becomes important later for the Kahoot. So then when they get to class, during that time that I'm giving them, which is usually a week or so to work on that homework and review quizzes, I work on the case study. So we have 6 modules, 6 different degrees possible within the College of Business. And so I have 6 case studies to go with the 6 modules, right? So we work on that case study as an active learning type thing in class while they're doing that homework. When I'm all done with the module, the last thing I do when I had a live class was I have a PowerPoint that I would use on one day to kind of go through a review basically of concepts and ideas that I was hoping they got right during this time, as well as some things thrown in from the case study, right, to be sure that they got the information there. And we're doing all this because there's going to be a module exam at the end, right? So they're going to have to go into Canvas at the end and they're going to have to take a module exam. In that exam are going to be questions from the test bank, from the book, as well as questions that I wrote from the case study. And that's all going to be melded together into one Canvas exam that like ends the module. Okay. So my problem was when I got saddled with live hybrid, and this is just my throw out to Dean Braun, who I know is on here. Dean, please let us switch that at some point, right? I truly believe that offering a live class for the ones who want it, that's maybe smaller, connected to a synchronous class for everybody who wants remote would work better. That's just my own little soapbox I'm going to say as we get started. Okay, now, how am I going to get these students, right, to come to this live hybrid class where I can't move? I have to stand in one spot, right? I've got to do a Zoom or a WebEx with 45 people, and I've got 5 people sitting in the room with me, but I can't really get close to them, right, or move. And everybody has to try to get these concepts. And in the past, I had done a PowerPoint lecture kind of thing on that one day. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is just going to be an added torture to what we've been doing, right, in this live hybrid class. So my answer for that was a Kahoot. All right. So the way what I did was, and we're going to play a Kahoot in just a minute so that you can all see how this works. 2-minute Kahoot. I took my slides that I would have used, right, as I went through that live lecture, and I only picked and choose the ones I wanted, right? And I ended up with roughly a 45 slide Kahoot where I've inserted different slides from my PowerPoint. And then along the way, to keep them engaged, right, I've asked questions. And those questions are the questions they missed when they were working in the homework at the very beginning. So the cool thing about this is, and I always say to them, as they miss the questions again in the Kahoot, I always say to them, here we are, right? You're getting the second chance to see the exact same question again. Let's see who can get it right, right? And still half the class misses it, right? The second time through. So this is a way for this to reiterate and also let them see that maybe their study habits aren't as good as they should be, right? When they're working in that flipped classroom up front, because there's a whole lot of things they could do to get that concept down a little better. All right, so what better way to show you how to do this than for us to play a Kahoot, right? For some of you that have never played one, I got 26 people on the call. That means 25 people should be loading into my Kahoot. And if you were in my class, I would have made you all turn on your cameras and I would have made you all play the Kahoot. So we're going to go with that. Okay. I want you to either grab your cell phone, because you could play the Kahoot on your cell phone if you feel better doing that. Or for those of you that want to stay on your computer, just open another tab at the top of your screen. Okay. All right, here we go. Kristen, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can, Ruth.
All right, cool. All right, so you're either going to go on your phone or you're going to go with that open tab to www.kahoot.it. Make sure you put your name in there so we know who you are when you win the game. We're going to wait for a minute while everybody gets logged in. There should be, I think, 25 people logging in. For those of you that have never played a Kahoot, you might be able to hear here in the background, there's some cool music playing. And Kahoot does us some favors during holidays. They make it really eerie for Halloween. They make it, you know, fun for the holidays. For Valentine's Day, they might put hearts up. So they do different things to kind of entertain us, right, while we play these Kahoots. While everybody's logging in, I also will tell you that in my classes, I use the Kahoot as a secondary attendance policy for that day. Everybody needed to log on to the Zoom so that we could take attendance for the day. And then everybody needs to play the Kahoot. Why do I do that? Because I'm trying to get rid of the students who like to log on and then just disappear, right? I know you've never had one of those. They log on and then they just disappear. They don't do anything, right? So by doing this, I force them to engage for this one class period and be part of what we do. Who's BDR? And who's Z when you win? You'll have to tell us who you are when that happens. All right, so we had 20, I think 25. So some of us aren't getting on. I must have lost you. Does anybody need another second? Kristen, they can tell us in the chat if they do.
I'm stuck on a green screen and it says you're in, see your nickname on the screen, and I see it in the bottom left, but when I click on it, nothing happens.
Amanda, you're in, you're good.
Okay.
So that brings me to the next thing. For those of you that have never played a Kahoot before, you need to either, because I'm sharing screen, you're going to see the questions, okay? But to do the answers, you need to do that either on your cell phone if you logged in there, or you need to go to that open tab that you opened, right, where you logged in, because what you're going to do is pick from 4 colors, okay? And you're going to click on the one that you think is the answer. So when we're playing Kahoots, you have to kind of, especially in a synchronous scenario, you have to pay attention to what we're sharing so that you can see the questions with the answers, okay? And then you got to pay attention to either the cell phone screen or the opened screen on your computer so that you know which color you want to click on for your answer. Does anybody have a question about that before we get started? So you're going to kind of be looking at both, okay? All right, here we go. You notice it said no need to answer this time, right? This is where you can take your PowerPoints, if you use PowerPoints in class, and you can insert them into the Kahoot. So this is a way for you to go through the PowerPoint with questions added and not have to change up, I guess, that PowerPoint. You can insert those PowerPoint slides exactly as they were. So originally, this Kahoot had 45 slides in it, not 7, right? Because I used my PowerPoints from the class, and then I inserted questions throughout. They had about 10 to 12 questions to answer. We're not going to do that because of time constraints, right? But that's the cool thing about it. You can put the slides right in here and then talk as you need to, right, about the slides. So here's one of my slides where this is the management module, by the way. And so here's where I'm showing them the basic management functions, right? And there's 4 of them. And the questions that we do today are going to be revolving around this, right? We would have talked about the definition for each of these. And now I'm going to ask some questions as we go to be sure you understood that. So here we go. Let's answer this one. So if you think it's true, you're going to click the blue. If you think it's false, you're going to click the red. All right, so 14 of us got it right, yay, and 7 of us got it wrong. Okay, so, and Jennifer was the quickest on the draw. Great job, Jennifer, you're at the top. Let's see if she can hold that spot. So remember, there were 4 functions of management. Which one is this one? All right, great job. 16 of us got it right. It was planning. And who was the quickest? Jennifer, still holding her title. All right, let's see. A couple more. Again, this is just showing you I can put the next slide in, right? So I'm going to talk about, okay, there's 4 functions of management, but there are also 5 very key skills that managers need to learn, right? And we could take that time, we could talk about whatever I wanted to concerning that, and then we would move on to either the next slide or another question. This is back to those 4 functions of management again, which is this one. All right, class was kind of split. Who got there first? Jennifer. Jennifer's going to be the queen of this Kahoot when we're done, possibly, right? Here we go. Last one. All right, great job. And in this Kahoot, number 3 was Herb. Great job, Herb. Number 2 was Z. I don't know who Z is. And number 1 was the queen of the Kahoot, Jennifer. All right. And special mention for Michelle and Rock. Now, the cool thing about Kahoots is the students love it, right? They love it they use them in high school, they use them in elementary school, middle school. So they kind of already are used to them by the time they get to us, right? And they love it. I did a survey at the end of the semester with 250 students, 5 sections of BA 1500. And in that survey, I said, okay, I made you do homework and I made you, I went through 4 different questions of things that I made them do, right? And the 4th one was the Kahoot. And everybody surveyed about 78% effective for the first 3, right? Which was making them read the book, do reviews, work a case study, that kind of stuff. And 94% effectiveness is what the students said the Kahoot was, right? Which we did only 1 day at the end of each module every 2 weeks, a total of 6 times. So they just love them, right? If you can figure out a way to put Kahoots into what you do, it's just a fun way to engage. And it is a way you can do all the things that Steve and everybody else talked about today, where you're trying to reiterate, have people see things more than once, close the loop, all those types of things.
Hey, Ruth, there's a question in the chat room. When everybody has answered, can you stop the clock? Go
I
on.
could, but that could mess, depending on the I could, but depending on the Wi-Fi and stuff like that, you could run into issues. What I do is just, if you think it's taking too long, you're allowing too much time for people to answer, all you got to do is change how long that is. So with those, I gave everybody 30 seconds. You could cut that down to 20, for example, and would make them answer a little faster.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to also reiterate, Ruth taught me how to use Kahoot. And again, my students were the same results. I actually did a survey and they loved Kahoot. They loved it because number one, they learned new things. They also liked the fact of trying to beat their classmates, and it was just very successful. And so now I'm going to try and learn how I can enhance that a little bit. And I like ideas about taking quizzes where the most people miss the question. And I'm going to put that into a future Kahoot and help them understand why they got it wrong the first time, and hopefully they don't get it wrong the second time. So it is very, very successful.
To help with the gaming piece of it, I actually do during finals exam time, after we're done doing our presentations, I do a little recognition event, and I recognize who the king or queen of the Kahoots was in each class, meaning out of the 6 times who got it right the most, right? And was Jennifer today, right? And then I recognize, so I mean, I try to even continue that recognition into the end of the semester, to help with the people who, people love to see their name in lights, right? I mean, that's just a cool thing. And if you can engage through that, why not? So,
Another question from the chat room. Do you give points based on the score or just for trying, or how do you do that?
great question. And I do not give points based on the score, because my thinking is some people are better at this than others, right? Some people are better at thinking quickly than others. So I do not give points for the Kahoot. I instead use the Kahoot as part of their participation grade. So if they got on and they actually did the Kahoot, because Kahoot will track all of that for you. So if they got on and actually stayed and played the Kahoot, they get their participation points for that day. We did, however, give the king and queen of the Kahoot 1 point of extra credit each time when they won. And 1 point out of 1,300, and they loved it. Okay, so there's another thing you can do.
Yeah, it was also pointed out in the chat that some people read faster than others, which would obviously help.
Yep. So I don't penalize anybody for being slower, right? If you all just do it, you get the points for participation. But I do like to recognize that one who was quick, like Jennifer today, right? And so they got that 1 point of extra credit, and they're going to get recognized as a king or queen of the Kahoot at the end of the semester.
And the reports, if you want to talk about that, Ruth, because those are very helpful. Yes, I used it for attendance, especially for those students who are in the classroom. But it also shows their performance.
Yes. So if I go back to the Kahoot account just for a second. There's all kinds of things that Kahoot does for you. Remember, the K through 12 folks, they don't have an LMS like we do, right? Typically. So they don't have a Canvas, for example, typically. So Kahoot is set up actually to be used by itself if you don't have an LMS. So they have lots of things in here that they do to try to help those folks who don't have Canvas, for example. So the reports that you can look at, for example, right? So if I look at my report on one of my classes from last fall. Maybe. So you can see here like how your whole class did, right? So 51% got this one correct. As you can see, this was the same one we just did, but it was the whole thing, right? So it had 45 slides, about 10, 15 questions. Out of, I had 41 people that played that day, right? And then it'll go into actually more specifics for you. So for the attendance taking part, right? You can see who played, and you can also see the ranking, meaning who got the most questions right, okay? And then there's other things that you can do within here if you want to use it. So for example, Kahoot will sort for you a little bit, right? And they'll say, hey, these 3 questions people miss the most. And then if you want to, you can do a new Kahoot based on the ones they missed the most out of the Kahoot. So that's another option that's available to people when you're using Kahoot. It'll track how everybody did, show you the questions that were the worst, and then you could turn that into a new Kahoot as a refresher if you wanted to, right? And use it again. It'll keep your Kahoots forever, so that's good, right? And you have access to many, many, many Kahoots that are out there that other people have made also. So it's all like one big, I'll call it test bank of Kahoots that you have access to, that everybody across the world that's using Kahoot has put in here for you. There's also, of course, training and other, that's where the Discover area comes in. You can play around on here to your heart's delight and go through trainings and get ideas and that kind of stuff too.
Ruth, thank you so much. And Ruth is always very generous too in taking questions and helping with Kahoot. She's going to do that for some of us here yet today. So please, I know, reach out to Ruth if you have questions. She's always very helpful, as well as our other speakers today. Does anyone have any comments or questions or willing to share things that you have done or you plan to do this spring in the classroom?
Dwayne had a question.
Yeah, and it's kind of to follow up with Ruth, but maybe get the rest of the group's opinion. Ruth encouraged us to turn on our cameras. I'm wondering if I would love to do that. I'm wondering if anybody has required students, if they're going to attend, to have their camera on. What I'm thinking about doing is putting them in the waiting room until they turn their camera on. But I'm wondering what others have experienced in trying to do something like that.
Yep, I do require my students to turn on their cameras. I tell them, corporate America, if your boss was on here, what would he think about you having your camera turned off? Okay. And we're training them, aren't we, to become employees later? So I take away their participation points for the day if they leave their camera off. And if something happens, like I have had a couple students who said, my camera broke. I'm like, great, I'll give you credit today, but make sure you've gotten that new camera from Walmart for $10 before next class, right? And then we'll gladly give you your points again. So I force it. It's bad etiquette for the students, I think, for them to be on there without their camera on.
I do not require it because of Wi-Fi and technology issues. I had a lot of problems who were having problems with lag and streaming times, and they didn't have the bandwidth to support the camera and the video feed. And I also found a number of students with roommates who thought it was fun to be distracting. Background things on the videos were not worth the time and effort. And with larger class sizes, I can only see 20 to 25 people at a time anyway. So I can't really be monitoring all the live screen action in my classes. So I did not require it.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I've got a TA, so that helps me, right? My TA gets on. And by the way, for everybody who doesn't know, if you're on WebEx or Zoom, if somebody's having a Wi-Fi problem and their camera goes off, a little tiny yellow insignia will come up on that person's picture. So you'll know that their Wi-Fi is acting up. They don't have to tell you that. So I still make them turn the camera on. I do accommodate if the Wi-Fi messes up because that's not their fault, right? But I do have a TA who can help me monitor all that.
See, in my previous life, I had a student complaint on one of the faculty, okay, because that faculty required student to turn on the camera. And the student complaint was its invasion of privacy. You are entering into my private space. That was the complaint. I don't know whether any of you had that issue or not, but that could be.
Yeah, and Zubair, I think that when you are clear about expectations up front, people can prepare their space for that, then I think it's fine. I mean, because people can prepare in advance. I think it's just letting them know.
But you're still entering into some person's house. They may not like it. It's not preparation. You are entering into the house unannounced and you're not welcome. I think that was the issue that student had. It's not that my house is cluttery or it's not neat and clean, so it's not that. It's just my private space. I don't want anyone. I want only people that are my family members.
But you could put a virtual background and not reveal anything other than your face. I would argue against that one. There's many ways to not invade privacy.
And you can also suggest that perhaps if they're in Bowling Green, come to campus and take the call from campus, a conference room, or go to their library or, somewhere else. They don't have to be in their apartment or home during class. There are other options available.
I think this was about eight years ago, but now I think technology has improved quite a bit. But I think one of the suggestions is to use the screens in the back. I think that's good.
Yeah, I just think I agree with Ruth. I think it's important to do it because I think that the cost benefit is that you're weighing that against students that are checking out. And what is you got to weigh the cost benefit analysis there and just say, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of a challenge when you acquire it, but the benefit, the potential harm to the class learning experience by not letting them, it degrades it too much.
Okay, I have a question. I get a few students who, I require that they keep their video on, but then they walk away and all I see is their fan going in their room. So how do you deal with, and I've even called on them and they don't come back. So how do you deal with that?
So for me, again,
I guess I'm going to open that up to anybody.
Yeah, for me, again, it's tied to participation. If I see that happen or my TA sees that happen, they're going to lose the points. They can talk to me afterwards if they have a legit reason, right? And we can discuss it. I also, at the end of every Zoom and WebEx, I stay in case people have questions, right, at the end of class. And if I see somebody's picture still there, I call on them. And if they're not there, guess what? They lost their points that day. This is all about WebEx etiquette. If these students go, it might not be such a big deal on our campus, and it might not be such a big deal for a mom and pop situation in business, possibly. But if they go to corporate America later and use bad etiquette, let's think about that. Do we want them to lose their job over that? I want to teach them the right way first, right? Now they can choose later to break it if they wish, but I'm going to teach them what corporate America wanted. So that's part of what I do.
Yeah. And I would offer, Donna, that the level of engagement and walking away is directly related to the relevancy of the task in the moment. So the more that they are walking away, that's probably they're walking away when they don't feel that they need to be there because they're not learning anything that they can't go back and look at later or read about. So if you have a task that they're trying to get done, like going back to that point that I was making about they're working on something and they walk away, it's like, crap, I just lost that. I'm not gonna pass whatever I have to submit because I need to be there for this. So it's really about that. I think asking, what am I doing in the moment to cause them to want to be there? And those that choose it, then there's some that, as you know, they don't care. But then you have to have Ruth's accountability system in place.
I will also add, that I've turned off my camera a number of times today when I've had a little person enter the space, right? And so I'm working on training my own children that when I'm in a meeting that I'm not available, but it's distracting to see someone come over and then I'm having a conversation, right? So I would also say that some of our students are parents or caregivers, and so they, may be turning it off intermittently for those reasons. I think if you have some sort of activity like Steve proposed, right, then you can sort of see what people are working on. I'm going to encourage all my students to turn their cameras on. I'm going to, strongly encourage them and encourage them to use backdrops and probably find a little video about how to add one. But I think that there are some potential equity issues that are a little complicated if you are simultaneously working from home and caring for numerous young children.
I'm sorry, I didn't give a presentation about ripen.com that I added to the chat. But for folks who want to work with external industry partners, I am having good luck with them, particularly in the time of COVID, where my local employers that I typically work with have their plants closed and can't interact with us in the way they have in the past. This semester, for example, we're working with a startup in British Columbia who will be putting their website live in February, right after all of our contributions to their marketing plan and strategy are due. So it's going to be a great experience for the students, just so you know that's there. And for what it's worth, universities can have partnerships with them. It is free for educators, but we could engage as a university.
Well, we're coming up on the end of our session. My heartfelt thanks to all our presenters for your time and sharing your tips and expertise with us. And for all the participants, thank you for your time. My best wishes for a successful semester and Happy New Year.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for your help, Brock.
Thank you.